Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. So we're continuing our discussion, overall review of the works of St. Thomas Aquinas. There are 7 volumes which inshallah I plan to read all, because the way he organizes his thoughts, he was tackling questions of secularists, philosophers, atheists, and other such peoples long time ago, and he's one of the most famous people of history for his substantial work, and anyone who has brain cells should read him and not be so afraid of him. And you study him anyways in Philosophy 101 and basic history, so best to study him and know what you're talking about. So this is question 2 in 3 articles: the existence of God. First article: whether the existence of God is self-evident. We proceed thus to the first article. Objection 1. It seems that the existence of God is self-evident. Now, those things are said to be self-evident to us, the knowledge of which is naturally implanted in us, as we can see in regard to the first principles. But, as Damascene says, the knowledge of God is naturally implanted in all, therefore the existence of God is self-evident. So this is interesting, contending that the knowledge of God is naturally in humans, and so because it's naturally in us, and it's naturally implanted, basically, then yes, it's self-evident. So let's see what he replies with. Well, actually, he does this one a little bit different. He'll do an answer that, so let's do it in a different way. Okay, objection 2 was, further, those things are said to be self-evident which are known as soon as the terms are known. So if you know the terms, it claims it's self-evident then if you know the terms, which the philosopher says is true of the first principles of demonstration. So first principles of demonstration. Thus, when the nature of a whole and a part of it is known, it is at once recognized that every whole is greater than its part. But as soon as the signification of the word God is understood, it is at once seen that God exists. Aha! Contending that once you understand the term of God, that brings it into existence. For by this word is signified that thing than which nothing greater can be conceived. So basically, there is no higher conception than God, and because of that is a weight towards the existence of God, because the human mind cannot even grasp something more powerful than God, because God is the highest form of creation. You follow? But that which exists actually and mentally is greater than that which exists only mentally. So that's true. I mean, if it's actually there and it exists in the mind, of course that's going to be more potent than what just exists in your mind, right? Because it has this sort of double potency. Therefore, since soon as the word God is understood, it exists mentally. That's interesting. So as soon as you understand the word God, it then comes into the your mental framework. It also follows that it exists actually. Therefore, the proposition God exists is self-evident. So, once you understand the existence of God and it gets into your mind mentally, that'll then make the argument that God is self-evident. Okay, objection 3. Further, the existence of truth is self-evident. I mean, yes, truth is self-evident when it isn't being veiled and obscured, right? For whoever denies the existence of truth grants that truth does not exist. True. True. And if truth does not exist, then the proposition truth does not exist is true. Yeah, that's a funny paradox. If there is anything true, there must be truth. Yeah, exactly. If there's things that are true, that means truth exists. And if truth exists, well, there you go. That's interesting. And if there is anything true, there must be truth. But God is truth itself. I am the way, the truth, and the life. John xiv.6. Therefore, God exists is self-evident. Now, this one's pretty interesting, how it's worded, right? So, if God is the supreme truth, and truth exists, that then shows that God is self-evident, because God is truth itself. Very interesting argument, right? How they frame that. Very logical. On the contrary, no one can mentally admit the opposite of what is self-evident. As the philosopher of metaphysics, IV, lecture VI, states concerning the first principles of demonstration. But the opposite of the proposition God is can be mentally admitted. The fool said in his heart there is no God. Therefore, that God exists is not self-evident. Now, this is interesting because if a fool admits there is no God, God isn't self-evident to him, but one could argue that even if the person doesn't realize the first principles of demonstration, once they understand the conception of God, and God being the highest truth, I'd argue that, you're going to see some naturally implanted understanding of God, right? There's this self-evident in itself, but not to us, and then there's the self-evident in itself and to us. So you're getting the essence of God and God's relation to truth, and all truth stemming from God. And now we're going to get into what Aquinas answers back with. I answer that a thing can be self-evident in either of two ways. On the one hand, self-evident in itself, though not to us. On the other, self-evident in itself and to us. So not to us and to us, you see. A proposition is self-evident because the predicate is included in the essence of the subject. So the predicate is included in the essence of the subject. So God is the subject, right? The essence is truth. So they're related to each other, right? As man is an animal, for animal is contained in the essence of man. If, therefore, the essence of the predicate and subject be known to all, the proposition will be self-evident to all. So, if the essence of God is truth, then it becomes self-evident to us because the proposition tells us that God is the ultimate truth, therefore self-evident, you follow? As is clear with regard to the first principles of demonstration, the terms of which are common things that no one is ignorant of, such in being and non-being. So, that's true. We are evident of being and non-being because we see the beings, but we don't get to see the non-being. Whole and part. Yes, we get to measure dimensions, right? And such like. If, however, there are some to whom the essence of the predicate and subject is unknown, the proposition will be self-evident in itself. True. So the predicate and subject is going to have its essence there regardless, in itself, even if you haven't realized it yet. But not to those who do not know the meaning of the predicate and subject of the proposition. Therefore, it happens, as Boethius says, the title of which is whether all that is good is good. That's like one. Is all that is good is good? It comes into amounts, I'd argue. Degrees and habits and how much good is good. That is interesting. Can there be too much good? Too much good of a good thing? That's a old topic. That there are some mental concepts self-evident only to the learned. I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, there are some, self-evident concepts only to the learned, but if you're born with this naturally implanted sensation of God, then it comes into mode when you really begin to understand the signification of the word God. I think you can discover it. Some mental concepts self-evident only to the learned, as the incorporeal substances are not in space. Therefore, I say that the proposition God exists of itself is self-evident, for the predicate is the same as the subject, because God is his own existence, as will be hereafter shown. So God is his own existence. God is his own existence. You follow? Now, because we do not know the essence of God, the proposition is not self-evident to us. We can know God's attributes, I'd argue, right? And they become evident to us once we realize the signs, from an Islamic perspective, what I would say. But I get that some people are deaf, dumb, and blind, right? They don't want to see. But need to be demonstrated by things that are more known. So you can demonstrate, the essence of God, and then help show the propositions, which will then help show the self-evidentness of God. So, very potent. He deals with very serious questions. And one of the questions over here I want to share with you, it's also very potent, which was his intro. Because the chief aim of sacred doctrine is to teach the knowledge of God, not only as he is in himself, but also as he is in the beginning of things, and their last end, and especially of rational creatures, as is clear from what has been already said. Therefore, in our endeavor to expound this science, we shall treat 1. Of God, 2. Of the rational creatures advanced towards God, 3. Of Christ, who, as man, is our way to God. In treating of God, there will be a threefold division, for we shall consider 1. Whatever concerns the divine essence, 2. Whatever concerns the distinction of persons, 3. Whatever concerns the procession of creatures from him, concerning the divine essence, we must consider whether God exists. 2. The manner of his existence, or rather what is not the manner of his existence. 3. Whatever concerns his operations, namely his knowledge, will, power. And concerning the first, there are 3 points of inquiry. 1. Whether the proposition God exists is self-evident. 2. Whether it is demonstrable. And 3. Whether God exists. So here, you got a very serious Catholic approach to answering very serious questions that are prompted by atheists and Darwinists and other types to people, right? I really do like how they break it down, divine essence. It's very structured. He goes through it very deeply. And this was the self-evident one. So is God self-evident? So basically, the knowledge of God is going to be implanted in you, being, not being, and the essence of the predicate and the subject are known to all. Proposition will be self-evident to all. So, very logical. The predicate is included in the essence and such. So, very, very potent. What do you think?